this is a bit of a tease. We'll talk some more about these soon, but we're shouting out and representing for Black History Month, on top of all that we're here to share around our coalition and our work in Cambridge. And, a year ago, we lifted up, Black and brown leaders, particularly some of the Black and brown women who are leaders in our field. And we just want to once again elevate and make sure we do not let another month or year go by without recognizing the importance of our work across the Black and brown community, across the families and the young people and the staff that come from so many different diverse backgrounds and deserve diversity in the leadership and in the staff within our programs. So a shout out to all of us on that front. You can, next slide, please. Okay, so if you haven't already done so, if you could in the chat, please put your first and last name, preferred pronouns, email, and organization name. You can add your role if you like as well. Thank you. Next one. So we're going to do just a quick shout out. Actually, it's hard for me to see everybody who's here. So my team, if you don't mind, if there's somebody we need to shout out who's new to the coalition, let's do that. But the first thing we wanted to say is there's an acknowledgement for, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to see who's here. All right.
Kari, if you, I don't know if you can see or pull up participants list, like just to scroll down, but yeah. I think we have definitely some folks that are new to the coalition meetings. Yeah. Some people have been in person, but Linda Bragna is interim director at the Tobin Community School. I believe this is your first coalition meeting. We have from Navigation Games, Maja Pratt, welcome. Jesus Armenta. So just a couple.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that help.
Yeah, new faces.
And it looks like Linda's now the director, just to be clear.
Oh.
Shout out from Michelle on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if the new ED from City Sprouts will be joining us, but Sue Dillard has come on, and we miss Jane, but it's great to have Sue and welcome her to the community. Anyone else who this is a new or a newer experience, you're definitely welcome. Okay. Next slide, quick shout out. So I'm not sure if Darren or folks from CCC are here, but
I don't see anybody yet.
He was recently received an award from the NAACP in Cambridge for a drum major for community service award. And yeah, Mercedes said that his mom dressed him up for this picture and she did a great job. Okay. So we'll see Darren, give him a high five. All right. Ways of being for the Agenda for Children. We practice anti-racism in our relationships with one another. These ways of being should be very familiar for folks who spend time with us in different spaces that we set and we convene. And if you are so moved, if you could maybe put in the chat the way of being that you feel is speaking to you today. So just to go over some of our desired outcomes for today, we're going to ground ourselves in shared values in order to utilize past lessons learned to inform future planning and progress. We're going to utilize a framework to discuss interconnections between systems, programs, staff, and youth level outcomes. And along those lines, also talk about purpose and sort of direction of the OST Coalition as a whole. We're going to reconnect, engage, and reflect with your OST peers and small group discussions. We're going to learn about future OST-LI opportunities and a couple of other professional development opportunities. We're going to look at OST staff level data comparisons. and consider how an OST capacity assessment could impact our ecosystem programs and youth, and I would say, and families as well. I should also mention for folks who didn't hear me introduce myself, because I might not have, that I'm Kari. I'm one of the co-directors of the Agenda for Children, OST. All right, next slide. Thank you. So just a quick summary of our agenda today. You see where we're at. We've done the welcome, talking about the overview of the agenda. We're going to do some small group sort of intros and check-ins. We'll do some freedom dreaming.
What happened?
Okay, so we're going to break into random small groups right now. And we'd like you to, in your groups, to focus on the one or both of these questions. And there are links on this. When we share out the slides, there are links to some videos, I believe, or actually one video of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech where he talked about being a drum major for justice. And there's also an article. So the questions are, how can we all be drum majors for justice? Or what do you think it means to be, to lead for well-being? Okay, so we'll ask you to find your breakout room button. Well, I hope that was fun, and I hope we're drumming for justice every day of the week. All right, we're gonna welcome folks who also came in. A couple people came in during the breakout, so welcome. We're gonna share the slides again.
Can I just say for Brian Zoloaga is the new Director of Programs at PBHA, replacing Matias, so he joined us.
Welcome, Brian.
Excellent, thank you, glad to be here. Hello, everyone.
All right, next slide. And sorry for those folks who missed Darren's picture, who are just arriving. All right, so actually you can go back to the Black history is American history. And you know, it's a nice color combination. It's a nice map of the US, continental, you know, artificially drawn borders. But I think for different folks, this may bring up different emotions. I just want to name this as sort of the concept of American history. And there's such a legacy of American history being, and so many histories being, if not filtered, narratives created in such a way that it does hide, it does perhaps deceive, it does twist. And the Black history as American history is undeniable. And so I just want to stand up on that statement. For better or for worse, this country would not be what it is without Black and brown people and the decisions that were made by the leaders of this country around the treatment and around the policies, around the attitudes that have gotten us to this day, you know, through thick and thin, through peaks and valleys. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about something connected to the history of the folks from the African diaspora who were either brought here in chains or, you know, ended up here by different means. And some people here may have heard of or been familiar with the Adinkra symbols. I don't know if you have, maybe put a little emoji or something in your window so we can get a sense of who's heard of them. There should be some Adinkra symbols in the emojis, come to think of it. But yeah, so these are primarily from West African origin, and they symbolize many different values, stories, fables even. Often there are animals, there's symmetry, there's different imagery that conveys the messages, conveys, you know, the lessons that are within the meaning of the symbols. And so today we're just gonna, you know, touch on a couple of them, but it's for folks who haven't maybe shown your staff or your young people these before. It's really fun, and you can do all types of collages. You can, there's a lot to learn from Adinkra symbols. And there's a slide, excuse me, there's a link as well, but you can, there's lots of websites devoted to it. All right, next slide, please. So This here, does this look familiar to anyone? Anybody ever seen a fence that looks like this design? Probably. This one, I believe, is in New Orleans. You may be able to tell by the style of the terrace and the garden and so forth. I feel like I saw these growing up in Cambridge and Boston as well. I know I've seen them in New York. And when I say seen them, it's this particular pattern actually is a representation of an Adinkra symbol called Sankofa. And there's different renditions of, an Adinkra symbol. Some have more detail and some are more artistic. This one, as you can see, has some repeating patterns. And if you'll notice, some of the spirals in some of the directions are headed one direction while the other one is in the opposite direction. And so let's go to the next slide to learn a little bit more about Sankofa. So we're about to go again into pairs to talk a little bit more about freedom dreaming by anchoring the concept of Sankofa. And Sankofa means to go back to the past and bring forward that which is useful. I'll just read from this slide. So it's a symbol of importance of learning from the past, a very popular symbol, especially in the African diaspora. It shows a bird turning around to catch its lost egg. It is a sign of the return, which says that it is never too late to turn around and start on a new path once one has recognized one mistake. And I would, I guess, paraphrase or add on to the concept of mistake as a lesson. And so you have, in this case, the bird, with its feet facing to the left and its head facing back, to learn from what has happened in the past to inform where it's going next. And so I don't want to dwell on the mistake part so much, but more so reflections of what has happened. And, right now in our lives, in our world, in our community, in our field, we're in the middle of a big, I would say, era of transition, of disruption. We can, thank a global pandemic for a lot of that. We had programs that had to shut down. We've had staffing challenges. We've had transition in leaderships. We've had new registration processes. We've had different people impacted and speaking up about access to after school and summer in different ways than we have before. And, decisions will continue to get made about what the next course, what the next set of strategies will be for our community. And we just want to make sure that each of us in our role and as a collective with the coalition are learning from the lessons in the past to inform where we go next. And also learning from the diversity of lessons different people have experienced and the perspectives that they may be able to share to inform where we go next. So let me just read this prompt and then we will go again into random pairs to do some freedom dreaming. What is your dream? If anything was possible, how might we use the Adinkra symbol of Sankofa to inform the strategies and success of the Cambridge Out of School Time Coalition going forward and into the future? And to clarify, you all are the OST Coalition. We are. It is a diverse set of providers, organizations, programs, and you are it. And we'll be talking a little bit more about our identity, but just take that statement, please, and find your breakout button when it becomes available. And yeah, let's think about this concept of Sankofa. Welcome back, folks. A couple new people joined us during that break. I think it was, help me out, who was it? It's Nadia and Theresia, yeah. Okay, can we share the slides again? We're going to move into the next segment. All right, so you heard me tease this earlier talking about, what is the Cambridge OST Coalition? And I was saying it's you, it's us. So we kind of hopefully nailed that down. So there's no questions about who it is, but a little bit more about sort of what it is and what the purpose of it is. We come together 3 times a year. convened by the Agenda for Children. We're a citywide intermediary. There's a lot of like words and jargon mixed in there as we try to describe what and how we try to support the out of school time landscape, or as we often call it, ecosystem in Cambridge. And so we're going to spend some time, again, in some different breakout groups, having a chance to talk about and think about what is the purpose of our coalition. And then also we're going to help maybe guide that conversation, or at least guide some of your reflection by highlighting the Every Hour Counts measurement framework. And so what I'll just kind of break down here is the diagram on the left, which has these circles that are overlapping. And I'll start kind of at the top, which is the systems level, this green piece here. And systems level is really important for any community, but in our community, it includes, our Department of Human Services, our school department, city leadership, the nonprofit coalition, nonprofit who provide many different services across the community. All the systems that really do set up policy, set up direction and practice and expectations for families, for educators. We recently did something around iReady. It's a district-wide initiative. That's a systems level strategy. So we know that we have to interact in that space. In many ways, the most important level is really the program level. It's where the young people show up. It's where our families sign up. It's where our educators and our artists and our unbelievable mentors do their amazing work. It's where you do your work. And, we talk about quality programs. We talk about high quality practices. The program level is really what needs to be happening and lively every day that it is available to a young person. And that does bring us to young people, which is really why we all do this work, why we show up. There's no point in doing systems and program work if we're not impacting young people and youth. And so we know through all the years that we've been doing this work, for those of us who have been in the mix for decades, those folks who are newer to it, we learn about all the different ways a young person can be impacted in our programs. And, the foundational ways, supporting them as humans, supporting their social emotional skills and their health, supporting their learning, supporting their curiosity, their identities. There's tons of research out as well that speaks to when they show up to a quality program with staff who are prepared and structured opportunities and choices, great things happen for our young people. So our coalition is definitely keeping in mind that we need to be able to move between these different levels at different times. And depending on the different role you may play in your organization or your program, you may find yourself also bouncing between these levels, but they're interconnected. And we know that one level can impact the next very easily. So just a question to kind of ponder is, what potential impacts can we collectively have on our systems, our programs, our staff, our youth? So these are questions we bring to every coalition meeting and conversation. Next slide, please. So we're going to do some more breakouts to get juices flowing. I guess the juices are flowing, but you'll see some new people, perhaps. Random breakouts are about to happen. So the first question is, what are your goals and vision for a healthy and equitable OST ecosystem? You could squeeze in the word OST Coalition and ecosystem if you like. But again, it's really around your goals and vision for a healthy, equitable, out of school time ecosystem in Cambridge. So we'll set up the breakout rooms again. We'll take about 8-9 minutes to have this conversation. We would appreciate you taking mental notes or actual notes, just to kind of, if something really stands out, we'll have a share out when we come back after this question, and we'll have a couple of rotations of questions. So please feel free to have your themes and your brilliant ideas available to be shared when we come back. And also you can always use the chat space to also share ideas.
Can we put this question in the chat just so if we forget?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We have time for a couple more sharings if there
I
are.
can share.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I'm in true transparency, I'm giggling because I got a text that said share. So I'm sharing, but just to add on to Meg and I's conversation, it was really, I was just thinking about, because it's heavy on my mind, the process for, creating equitable process for applications and enrollment for after school programs, but also it is my hope that, Kari, I appreciate you bringing up Sankofa as a thought. I appreciate moving forward and being able to look back. And I know that in our efforts, we're really trying to do well for families, but it is my hope that in creating new efforts and new initiatives that we are always looking back and seeing who is it affecting, and is there room for change, or do we have to change, and being okay to say we might have to. I'm just thinking about our middle schoolers, and it's really difficult for me that they're not able now to sign up for after school themselves, and knowing that they're the ones doing the legwork of signing up for programming themselves. I get alignment with for families in signing up, but when it comes to middle schools, they're not necessarily thinking about summer right now. I can put it in their mind, but they might watch 10 Instagram videos that put something in their mind before going home to get that message home as well. So it is my hope that we're able to think about middle schoolers a little differently in the future. And you can collect data and see how that can work, but I would like it would feel lovely for them to be able to somehow put their information there. Maybe we're reaching out to them and doing the legwork for them, reaching out to parents, but to not have a parent having to be the one to put their name in the application be the barrier.
Thank you, Vanessa. I'm hearing, some strong themes around accessibility, intended and maybe sometimes unintended impacts that changes we may institute could create, and centering the young people, particularly in the middle grades. All right, I see Daniel and then Nancy. If you could take a minute or so each, we'll be able to move to the next question. So go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, this is something I just want to name that may need some attention at another point in the meeting. Some of Vanessa, what you're sharing is really important because it helps provide insight about some of what's happening within DHSP that I don't think is transparent or clear to many providers be outside of DHSP. And we heard at the September coalition meeting the lack of awareness from nonprofit and community-based providers about some of the moves that are made in DHSP. And I just want to make sure, Vanessa, what you just shared is so critical, and it's critical both within DHSP in terms of the alignment y'all are working towards there, and it has impacts to the broader OST system. It has impacts to nonprofits, it has impact to families and to young people, and I'm not sure that everyone in this room knows the details of what you're talking about. And so I just want to make sure there's space to have shared understanding of some of what is happening within these different systems so that we're all operating and can be thinking from a shared place around how do we move forward around that.
Thank you, Daniel. And it's totally appropriate for you to bring it up in this context and this space. We won't be able to dive as deeply into that at this specific moment, although there are some other opportunities in the agenda today to talk about some of these issues. And we are hoping also to engage with Michelle Farnham, on some of the related topics on the second half of the agenda today. And I'll just say this before moving to Nancy is we were talking during the break in terms of like the different spaces the Agenda for Children holds and convenes, and how often the topics do toggle between youth level, program/staff level, and systems level. And these conversations around enrollment application, timelines, lotteries, et cetera, and whether they're DHSP has been a big issue, as you say, or others have popped up in different spaces and should continue to. So I don't want to restrict that conversation to just this Zoom or just this coalition meeting or to the next one. But I do want to say this is a good space to dive into that. So thank you. Nancy.
It seems like the 3 breakouts that I was in had the similar theme of capacity, and that, families, there isn't enough care for kids in the city. And I'm just wondering on a systems level what role the coalition could take to advocate to the higher beings in the city that we need some big changes and maybe like a revolution. And what is the role of the coalition? And I am so sorry, but I have to go to another meeting, so I'm gonna have to also sign off, but thanks.
Thanks, Nance. Chris, and then we'll transition to the next question.
Thanks. Yeah, and Daniel, I think, brought up something that Nadia and I chatted about in our conversation, which was just about what the OST ecosystem and coalition could look like to increase equity and health in all of our programs. And I think communication was a big thing, and that transparency, but with transparency comes vulnerability and people feeling comfortable and having space to be raising issues in our program. And so I think a thing that we talked about was just, not necessarily having to rely on personal relationships as the connective tissue that allows information to flow. But then also, as we were talking about, just kind of like the amount that nonprofits have access to information that the city has, and how we can create a more collaborative approach and be working closely together to be making sure that all of our kiddos and families are getting access to the same information and resources.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And I see some other comments in the chat. You can feel free to also add their resonance across the board here. All right. So we're going to go from primarily systems level mindset to programs and staff level. So our next question for the next breakout group is for you to consider, what are the characteristics of out-of-school time programs and staff that are able to meet the diverse and specific needs of our youth? Okay, I'll read it again. What are the characteristics of OST programs and staff that are able to meet the diverse and specific needs of our youth? This is something I'm sure you think about often, and with the breakout rooms / groups, you have a chance to, again, share different perspectives on this, maybe find commonalities, maybe find some differences. But we welcome you to dive into this question now.
And the first thing that came to mind for us was flexibility and adaptability. But then it kind of morphed into, and again, I'm just coming from my aspect of it, but Liz and Tyreek, jump in anytime you want. The ability to have critical thinking skills and be invested in the work, and just pre-COVID was, people seemed to have more energy and more ability to give more of themselves to the kids. And we'd like to do that back.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. And energy, you're right, the energy from after pre-COVID. I mean, comparing the two is very different. Would anyone else like to share? Please feel free to unmute yourself.
It's interesting. That exact notion that Barbara just shared came up in our group too. We had a nice discussion about it. And one of the other things that came up was just understanding or being able to relate to kids as far as like who they are going to be in the future. So they can both see who they are in self and then also spirit moving forward. And just the idea that, you know, while we have kids sometimes for 20 hours a week and after school or 10 hours a week as a coach, in 2 decades, we might see them in a different capacity. And while we're helping or guiding them through decisions or being fun parts of their life, we always want to treat them well because they might be making different decisions down the road and we might have a different relationship with them. And whether it's through employment or making a big decision or something like that, we become a larger resource than the time that we spend with them in this moment.
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Adam. And that trusted source, right? Like when you know them at such a young age and stay in the community. Thank you. Also, please feel free to dump your response in the chat if you don't feel like unmuting yourself. But I think we have space for 1 or 2 more people to share. Does anyone else want to unmute and give it a shot?
I would. Hi.
Hello.
I would say diversity is very important for me, as far as like, you know, when we hire, you know, staff to work with our youth, diversity is very important in our program. So the kids can identify with our staff and they'll be able to, you know, talk and express and just feel comfortable, because it's very important to have a variety on your staff for all the kids to relate to. Because I know for me, when I go out anywhere, to be honest with you, I do look for my kind, you know, if it's always the same people, you know, but you do look for people that are like you, that you can identify with, that you can feel comfortable. So I feel the same way for our youth as well.
That's all right. Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate you. Okay, we have one in the chat. Part of the dream is that our young people, if they choose to become the leadership staff of their programs, which many times result in highly committed staff. Thank you for that, Melissa.
I'd like to just piggyback on Cheryl's comments, because in our group, we were talking about the challenge of when you need more technical or more skilled teachers or leaders. So with the younger kids, you might need, you know, you might not need you need a babysitter potentially. Whereas at the top end, we work in orienteering. So we need high-level orienteers. You know, anyone can set up an orienteering course in the playground or the park. But when you're going out to the Middlesex Fells, you want to make sure you don't lose your kids. So if the community doesn't have that expertise, having to bring people into the community. So what we look for is leaders who are open. They might not have worked with a community like that is as diverse as Cambridge on so many different levels. So being able to sort of educate or teach about the type of environment and the people they will be meeting. So Michelle had mentioned the agenda for children training, you know, just leveraging that so that people can have something to work with and to learn about, so that when they go in, they can make that connection with the kids, which is really important. So that what they're teaching is heard from both sides. So we want open-minded, interested, curious people who are open to learning from the kids and can adjust and adapt. And us as leaders can support them in that journey.
That's great. Thank you very much. Tyreek?
Real quick. Yeah. Hey everyone, Tyreek, work for the Jennifer Children's Youth Connector. I'd say talking about staff is you know, how much are you really gonna value your staff? Are you gonna hire them full time? Are you gonna give them benefits? What are you doing to make your staff want to stay? As someone who was a former lead teacher at a community center and had to leave because it's not financially stable being there. Even though I love the kids and stuff, but you take care of yourself first before you can take care of anybody else. So think about that too.
That's great. Thank you, Tyreek. All right. I think that's time. Not sure. Kari, am I passing this back over to you?
Yeah, sure. We're going to go into our last round of questions. So we started at systems level, went through the program staff level, and of course, we want to land on the youth level. So our last question here, again, a familiar one for many of us, but a good one to, again, dive into with colleagues and peers is what types of opportunities should our youth have to grow in and across our OST programs? And so the phrasing there about in and across is really trying to emphasize within any program you currently work in or affiliated with, but also across any program they may attend. We just heard about navigation games, one that maybe some of us have never experienced before, but we would still, I think, have certain hopes for the types of opportunities in a program we've never been to. So just allow you to kind of air that out a bit. So you can definitely speak about personal and specific programs you're involved with, but also across any program in Cambridge. So why don't we jump into those groups, and we will, this will be our last rotation of breakout questions for this segment. Welcome back, folks. So just to roll right into the next share out, same routine, please unmute if you'd like to share or add thoughts to the chat. We are focusing on youth level issues, opportunities, again, across this out of school time ecosystem and all the programs represented here. What types of opportunities should our youth have in our programs? Who wants to kick it off?
I can. We spoke about having like feeder programs or feeder schools, and knowing and naming that a lot of that can come from simply just networking, me looking at someone's square and reaching out to them. But if there was more of a system within the ecosystem that maybe, for example, you guys were kind of making these connections for us in different parts of the city, but being able to say at the end of your third grade year, now you can connect to these youth programs because they start at fourth grade, but having systems where families are being reached out to, or we're doing some type of meet and greet that kind of just carries them on to the next. But then we also spoke about having almost like menus for families of, hey, your child is in fourth grade. And I know like Find It and our booklets have this, like these are all the options, but maybe even saying, here's an example family, the Fisher family has done this through the year, and this is what it could look like. I think that sometimes that might be easier for a family to understand and see an example of possibilities as opposed to saying, these are all the possibilities.
Love that idea. Of course, we're always thinking about different ways to create resources. So happy to consider those options, getting grade specific. Any other sharings here from your, look, I see Barb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were talking about kind of like interest-driven pathways for young, opportunities for young people to follow their interests. So even at a young age, right? Like Janine was talking about the student success plans that start at 9th grade, and the hopes that they are in when they're in 9th grade, they're not in a like, I don't really know what I'm interested in space, that it comes before that. And if we have a network, if we have an ability to have like, you know, like 1 million Tyreeks, right? And across the city that can connect young people to other programs, that if they're really interested in the arts or a specific art program, like, could they go to the art center? Does the art center even have capacity for that? Like, so you go from like generalist to specific, and then we talked about like, how do we identify gaps? Like, do we even know if there's gaps in services offered? So that's what we talked about. And we talked about collaboration and communication, and actually really knowing what other programs offer across the city for the young people.
Mhm. Thank you. That's huge. Thinking beyond your own walls and maybe virtual spaces as well. Let's do one more with Melissa.
Thank you, Kari. When I saw the question, I thought about how in OST we balance the needs of young people and the opportunities we need to provide for like right now in the current like world we live in, but also the future. And in a couple of different spaces, Leslie, as well as the district, thinking about what the future of work is going to look like and how artificial intelligence is going to be the big part of the future. Like, robots are coming, and I want to prepare our young people to be in leadership in that world of work that's coming. So to me, the opportunities need to be both meeting the needs of young people right now, but also thinking about what the future is going to look like, which is going to look very different than the world we live in.
Thank you. This is so important to think literally about the future, not just conceptually. Robots are coming. Probably RoboCops too. So use your turn signals. All right. Let's see. There's another one here from Meg. My group talked about the fact that all youth deserve the opportunity to build community. Wonderful and strong concept that I think so many of your programs strive at, and create community in a different way than is possible in school, just to be clear. Often that's the case. All right, so if you have any other thoughts that you came up in your group that you want to add in the chat, we'll take them. At this point, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll put some music on during that break, I believe, and then we will call you back at 11:17. If you guys can come back on screen for a moment. Thank you. So we have a couple segments left. The next one will be focusing on some issues that already came up today, and I will make that transition in a moment. Before I do that, I just want to give you all shout outs for traveling through these different layers we just did of systems, programs, staff, and youth. It's really intentional that we're able to consider our intersections and understand that through this concept of an OST coalition, we are a collective. Mercedes said I was truth in advertising with my t-shirt today. So if you put it in the mirror, it says, "We cannot walk alone." And that's true, not just at this coalition space, but in many spaces that we enter. And it's not to say you have the responsibility or even accountability for others, but it's important that we have perspective and we have connection. And when we can be, representing others, we do that with respect. All right, so I want to hand this over to Michelle Farnham from Department of Human Services in just a moment. As we have heard and talked about and experienced, there's been a lot of change in the air, and there's been a lot of adjustments, particularly since the disruptions of COVID. There have been spaces, on the ground, spaces that are family focused, spaces in schools, political spaces as well. And sometimes folks in the Department of Human Services, folks in the Cambridge Public Schools that I know, like, we find ourselves in these different spaces. And recently, going back, I don't know, maybe a year or more now, there have been some subcommittee meetings at the city council focused on quote unquote human services, but also really much focused on out of school time capacity, the waiting lists, families definitely voicing and advocating for spaces, whether it's for their own specific kids or for the community at large, or, you know, for those who quote unquote need them the most. And the Agenda for Children, Susan and I, we've been asked to come into those subcommittee meetings at times to be resources, to listen, to help broaden the conversation beyond just DHSP. But at the same time, you know, Michelle and Ellen have been asked to really respond to calls for action, calls to like fix this this capacity issue that we know at the end of the day, there's not enough slots for every kid currently the way we're set up across the city. So I just want to give that premise. Actually, let me think, Michelle. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put the slide up that has a couple of bullets and hand it over to Michelle to give, you know, kind of a short, you know, sort of some reflections, and then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A or some things in the chat that we can kind of use to help us think about what's ahead. So we could get the slide up, and I know Michelle also has another thing to head to. So just to be, is that still the case, Michelle?
It is.
Yeah, so don't worry about scaring her away. She's going to run away anyway when she's done. So you can get right at it. All right. We'll take a look at the slide. You can just start speaking us up.
Okay. Thank you, Kari. And I so appreciate being part of this coalition. And every time I feel like I join these meetings and have the opportunity to speak to people in breakout groups, it's a reminder of how connected we are and how challenged we all are in trying to address some of the inequities that already exist. I'm sorry, I was just completely distracted because I spotlighted myself. So I'm talking to you all and like just seeing my big face. That was weird. So I really appreciate this opportunity to sort of check in with the coalition about particularly this idea about the capacity study that we, both I and Ellen Semenoff have talked to this group before. And in the idea behind this capacity study, which came out of a city council order, I wanna say last December of 21, was really and that was our way of saying that we are a coalition and we are a connected ecosystem, and that we collectively understand that currently, just as it's come up in this meeting today, there are not enough after-school seats for all of the children who want and need them. And some of this has been the problem, just to go back to what Daniel raised, what Vanessa had raised. Some of the problem was exacerbated by the return from COVID, as we all know, sort of like the desire for more families to access after-school care and to jumpstart their children's sort of social emotional connection with other children was true. And at the same time, DHSP did make some significant changes to our enrollment process that changed the face of who was prioritized for enrollment and the way in which families enrolled in programs. And as we've talked about in this meeting, and as Daniel reminded us, right, there were many, I would say, unintended consequences of those changes. So while on the one hand, we were some of those changes, which I stand by, which I'm happy about, which prioritized low-income children for placement in city-run programs, and had a singular universal enrollment system to make it easier for families to not have to come in person. The unintended consequences is that people who were historically used to getting a placement in particularly our community schools now did not get a placement, and they still desired and or needed after school care. And so that change meant that there were lots of families, again, that had historically been served by our programs that now were trying to access community-based programs, and that has fundamentally shifted in some cases the demographics of who's enrolled in our community-based programs as sort of like opposite from us. So we recognize that, and it definitely was an unintended consequence. And what we recognize too is that we don't have enough seats for everybody who wants them. And so this capacity study is our desire to really look at the ecosystem and to collectively, not overnight, figure out how might we grow our capacity across the system, trying to identify where is the greatest need. Is it a certain age group? Vanessa talked about the middle school, right? So like how can we work together like we did when we created the middle school network here to change the way we do business as well to meet the needs of families. So we are still planning on engaging in this. I would say, as Kari mentioned, we're in this moment where, as the city, we are beholden to the city council and city leadership around expectations that we begin now. Even as we are examining what's possible, there is an expectation that we are currently working to figure out within our existing systems, how might we push against that and grow the number of particularly K-5 spots in our system. And so we are trying to be creative in this moment and trying to figure out what are ways we can do that and what are ways that it's not the city alone who does that. How can we, even in the moment, bring into the fold maybe some opportunities for existing community-based organizations to think with us. And so the capacity study will continue beyond what we're hoping to do. We've got our eye on crafting some very short-term changes and then want to be looking at longer term. So like, what might we be able to do in September 23? And what might we be able to do in September 24? And how can this coalition help both advocate for our community, but also for families, right? So we know that we are also needing to bring families into this fold as well. So that's sort of our general timeline. The end of this month, we will be meeting with the subcommittee for the city council just to talk a little bit about this, about what ideas that we have that we want to explore for our short term. And then this, again, revisiting our longer term goal to engage way more robustly with our community partners and with families about this.
Thank you,
That's what I got, Kari.
Okay, no, thank you. So, any, immediate reactions? This is not the only time that reactions will be heard or appropriate, but while Michelle is here for a couple more minutes, and just in terms of the time we allotted here, we're not spending the rest of the meeting on this, but definitely if you want to jump in and ask a question, share a reflection, share an advocacy point, feel free.
Michelle, I have a question.
Sure.
It's a policy order, right? Or something like that. Is it only focused on seats? Like, or is there a focus around like staffing capacity and all of that?
Can you, I mean, the order is for seats.
Yeah.
Obviously the consideration has to be a little bit on like, for us, it's like, well, we can't expand seats without an expansion of staffing, et cetera. Yeah. So
yeah, it's like a domino effect.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your quandary here.
Well, I'm not seeing any. I'll just jump in and say, on the slide and also in the chat, I added some bullets. One of them I just want to point out, which is important for all of us, and particularly the Agenda for Children's involvement in the capacity study that has yet to be launched, but is still a commitment to do so, is that we have a focus on elevating and increasing understanding of our stakeholders and communities' needs. And anybody who was around when we were involved with the Building Equity Bridges project may remember that was a big focus of that project, which was seeking out the voices that are sometimes hardest to hear and hardest to have somebody trust you or the system, quote unquote, enough to provide input, to expect the input would have any kind of impact. And it's one thing to have people who show up for subcommittee hearings or write a letter or an email or literally just show up in department offices. It's very different to take the effort to hear from and elevate the other range of parents, caregivers, staff, alum, older young people who've been through our system. And so I just want to name that as an expectation as we continue, hopefully, to really use this opportunity to catalyze more informed strategy and change and resources.
Thank you, Kari. I'm going to jump off and happy to continue to engage with members of the coalition as we continue this work. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Michelle.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in. How's everybody doing? So I want to, part of what we do at the OST Coalition is share back data that you have given us. And so I want to just thank Mercedes Soto, Impact Evaluation Advisor for people who don't know me, for the agenda. And so again, I want to first start off by just saying thank you for responding. We know how busy you all are. And again, as I've had conversations with people, obviously our young people and our families are our first priority in how we organize our time and what we spend time on. And so we understand that. And we are also really grateful for you taking the time to come and be one with each other and us. And also just when we do ask for information about your program profiles that help us, we sort of framed the, in 2020, 2019-20, when the world was shutting down, we were able to collect a bunch of data from programs just about, your staff capacity, your young people that you're serving. And then last spring in May, June, we asked, okay, we wanted to be able to compare what we got in 2020 with what's happening in 2022 at the end of 2022. And so I'm going to share a couple of slides with you all. And again, I want to preface by saying this is partial data. We're still in the process of connecting with programs and getting data. And because that's always the hard part, is the collection, and then there's the analysis, and then the sense making. And so we're not exactly where we wanted to be, but we are where we are, and we're still working on it. And just we need, like Kari's t-shirt says, we cannot walk alone, we all have to do this work together. So I am going to just share really quickly, and then we want to give you all time to do some sense making in small groups, just like we did when we were all around the table together a while back. So again, this is just a brief, when we did this in 2020, we had good response, almost 50 programs. And then in 2022, we had some additional programs, but we didn't get data from all of the programs who responded in 2020. So there are 36 programs for which we have data for both years, right? And then for 49 that we have just for 2020. And then we did get some new programs who didn't submit in 2020, but submitted in 2022. And so like all told, there's 52 programs that share data with us. And so we're still in the process of tracking down, like, and we want to increase that number on that first line of programs that we have data for both years. And so we'll be following up with you and trying to get that. So just in presenting this data, we were looking at trends, and we know that obviously like we have an incomplete data set, but starting off with the number of seats that are available at the different age levels, the blue bar represents what the data was in 2020, and the red bar represents 2022. So even though again, it's incomplete, and we're still following up with the programs, we see that there is a decrease in the amount of capacity during the school year. And again, this is school year. So we expect that once we have all of the data for 2020, that those red bars will go up somewhat, but we still expect that there will be fewer or less capacity in, in 2022 than there was in 2020. And so again, as Michelle and others have pointed out, there's a relationship between the staffing and our ability to serve young people, right? Our ability to recruit and retain high quality staff is related to how many young people we can serve. And so this was the slide that we shared with you in 2020 about like in the typical school year, how many full-time staff and how many part-time staff worked. And then this next slide is a comparison. And so again, like we see, there's a decrease here, right? And we expect that in this graph, the blue bar represents full-time staff, the red bar represents part-time staff. And then if you look at from 2020 and compared with 2022, there's a decrease in both. And it was a substantial decrease for part-time staff. Again, once we get the data for the 11 programs that we don't have 2022 data for, we expect that the bars on the right side of the chart will go up because this is partial data for 2022, but we still think it would be lower than it was in 2020. We want to send you all into small groups, and just ask you, these are just some guiding questions, right? When you look at those two graphs, it's like, what are you noticing? What stands out for you? And what questions does it raise? And again, this is partial data, but what does it tell us about our story? And then thinking about the coalition members, like, what is our role related to gathering data, analyzing, and sense making? And then how can this collective data support the advocacy goals? Like several people have mentioned, like, what are we advocating for, right? Whether it's more resources so that, we can, provide more full-time positions and benefited positions so that we can serve more children. I'm just throwing that out there, but what are we advocating for? And then what's the data that we need to be able to support that advocacy? And then just the last question, and this is a kind of planting a seed in the back of your mind of, we are interested in doing some sense making, and there are people who like to dive deeper into data in terms of thinking about what are the things we should be collecting and reporting back to the whole. And then what are the other audiences, whether that is the policymakers, whether it's funders, but, thinking about the levels of data that we want to present to different audiences. And if that at all, makes little bells go off for you, or you're like, I'd be interested in doing that, then definitely would love to, work with a group to bring this work forward. So I'm going to stop the share, and Ashley's going to send us all into small groups. Just again, that was more of a conversation starter. And then we want to hear back from you when you come back. So whenever you're ready, you can join, and we'll put the questions in the in the broadcast. Welcome back, everybody. If you want to take a few minutes to drop in the chat any noticings that you want to share with the community. I realize I did not do a great job of directing people to the slides if you wanted to take notes. But just in the interest of time, and definitely drop in the chat if you're interested in being on this like OST data sense making crew, because I think we want to be able to dive deeper and in ways that are engaging and that we're making sure that the information that we're sharing back with you is helpful. There's a couple of slides that I'm not going to share, but just wanted to point you to so that you know that they're there. One of the other things that we share back with organizations is their professional development engagement levels. Like every group gets their organizational report, as well as certificates for staff and transcripts for staff. And we did put together a couple of slides that have aggregate data for multiple years. And so we did see an uptick last year in 2022 in the amount of engagement, and especially at the executive and upper executive levels and program director levels. So that's great. So definitely put your observations in the chat and reach out to me if you're interested in doing more on data and sense making system level. And I'm going to hand it over to Ashley Kelly, who is our OSTLI coordinator. And she has some slides to share.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ashley Kelly. I coordinate the Out of School Time Learning Institute. I know many of you. For those that I don't know, hi. I am here to let you know about a few different slides that we're working with. One of them is the target audiences for all the different roles that are in OST programs, along with all the different PD opportunities that the agenda offers. So we have our monthly COPs. The Executive Director Learning Space meets 3 or 4 times a year. Our yearly OST Symposium will be in person this year. Well, November 2023, but I'm excited to have it back in person. We will be at Lesley University again. We offer an assortment of different trainings, and those are introductory, intermediate, and advanced levels. Included in the trainings are also the baseline asynchronous trainings that you can use on demand at any time. These are great to use in your teams. These are also great for when new staff come on board. You want to get them ready for either your summer programs that are coming up or when we're getting back together with our programs in the fall. And Sean and Annie, who's currently on maternity leave, run the networks for the Agenda for Children. And you're currently here at the OST Coalition meeting run by Kari and Susan, who we are missing a lot today. Can we go to the Black Panther and youth development slides? The other slides on here are great for you to look back into the slide deck, but I wanted to shout out the Black Panther Innovation Series. It's a partnership between the Agenda for Children, Cambridge Public Libraries, and the STEAM Initiative. There's a few people in this group today that are part of our planning group. Barbara Brothers, and I saw somebody, oh, Mr. Tyreek, who's also our youth connector, is helping us plan this. We're really excited about it. Hopefully offering a movie screening to get everyone's brains primed to do some really exciting workshops throughout the next week.
Hey, can I just add, there's a couple of other people who have showed interest. So Sarah, if you're still on the call, I know that you're interested, so we'll reach out.
Awesome, thank you. We have a couple teachers that are interested as well, so.
Okay, I'll send you an email right after this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is have as much community involvement in the planning as possible. Go ahead, Ashley. You told me to use my voice, so I'm using my voice.
I did ask you to use your voice. Thank you very much. More people that are involved, the better the planning is going to go. I'm really excited for what it's going to turn into. And it's a great opportunity to get your staff into the hive and actually explore what technology and materials are available to staff and programs. And everything else is in the slide deck, so I'm going to pass it off to Tyreek so he can talk about the, oh, I lied. Sean.
All right, I'll be really quick. Later in the month, a group of men of color who work in the Cambridge OST world and Cambridge Public Schools will be participating in a COSBOC training, which is a series of 3 professional development sessions. And what it is an experimental journey grounded in African indigenous rituals, manhood development, and hip hop pedagogy as participants engage in their own rites of passage experience. It's going to prepare the participants to incorporate the drum framework into existing or new programming for boys or young men of color. And it is a research-based framework designed to strengthen students' academic achievement and to develop an affirmative social, emotional, and cultural identity.
Thanks, Sean. We're just shouting that out as an exciting addition to our professional development landscape and a really important model of collaboration between different departments, different nonprofits who are making space for their staff to join this cohort. And it's the Office of Equity and Inclusion, specifically at CPS. That's that logo that you may not be as familiar with the hands. All right, thank you. And, oh, sorry, if there's anybody who has staff or has interest, please reach out to me or even put something in the chat. We're still trying to figure out the size of this cohort, but we have some flexibility. If there are folks, men of color, Black and brown, indigenous, what have you. And of course, we're open to talking about this with anybody who has interest to know and learn more. All right, I'm gonna pass it to Tyreek for an important update on our summer rolling summer resources event. Go ahead, Tyreek.
So we are rolling in summer currently, and it is close. Our event is happening on the March 4th. And what we are looking for is we have a summer guide that we will be distributing to families around the city. And we have to make sure that all your programs are signed up and we have all your summer information. So when it goes out to families, they can know too. And also, it is very important that you not only fill out our summer guide so families can see you in a book and online, but you also fill out our table so you can come to the event and have a table and talk to families face to face, because families lack that now, and it's really good if they can come out and meet the people that they're going to send their kids to. We really encourage that for you guys. So yeah, feel free to please sign up, follow the links, email me, email Sean, email Kari for more information, and we will give it to you. Thank you.
Thanks. And Tyreek, if you could drop that link in the chat for the resource guide. And there will be roller skating again, and there will be DJs again, and there will be pizza and other snacks again. And it was amazing last year. We had, I think, 50 to 60 providers come out, so please come join us. And this is a collaboration with DHSP, who has done camp night for years and years. And so this is a evolution of that as well. All right, advocacy is the word I want to kind of close on. And there's another Adinkra symbol here. I'll try to pronounce it. Boa me, na me, moa wo. Help me and let me help you. And I just want to give us a chance before we do the plus deltas, which will be the last slide, I believe, to give you a chance to share in the chat any affirmation, any love that you want to provide to the coalition, to Out of School Time as a community, and just to have that as a opportunity to reflect back, this is what I want to give and also what I want to get. And you can see that the symbol kind of represents that. Next, let's do the next slide. So we have, or whoever's doing it, we have a plus delta slide. I guess you could just put it in the chat, plus delta. We had a slide as well, but it's just as easy given that we're up against the clock. We'll come back to that. slide another time. Thank you. So if you're in the slides, you can go right out here, appreciations and deltas. And if you have anything you want to share in the chat along these lines, now would be the time to do it. We appreciate everybody joining us today on Zoom. We are hoping to be in person for the next coalition meeting. We are hoping to, again, reclaim some space at Leslie that has been good to us. And we're hoping Susan will be with us, and we're hoping all of you will be with us. Thanks for hanging in there. Have a great rest of the day.